Today, we're taking a look at the Maurice Lacroix Aikon, a watch that blends luxury, quality, and design from a brand that has a rich history dating back to 1975. Let's take a quick dive into what makes this watch truly awesome. When looking at this watch, there are a lot of strong design elements that come into play that make this watch look amazing. But let's start by talking about the dial. This watch has a lot going on for it in that aspect. From applied indices, a really nice textured dial, really nice finishing as well on things like the date window, and it all comes together so beautifully. The dial has a really nice three-dimensional texture on it, and it plays with the light so perfectly. When you're looking at this watch, you can see that every single one of these little squares has a very different shadow to it, and altogether, it really makes this dial pop. Another thing that I personally really like about this watch is the use of high polished finishing to contrast against the textured dial. Here we can see that the indices, the frame around the date window, and the handset are all a very nice high polished finish, and I really like that. It gives it that nice luxury touch that the watch needs. Now, the keen-eyed of you will have noticed that the indices and the handset do have lume markers on it, so let's take a look at that. Pretty impressive for a watch that doesn't really have, your traditional lume pips or dots. I give this a pass, even though that's not where this watch shines. Pardon the pun. The next thing I want to look at here with this watch is the case. There are a lot of small design elements that come together to make this case what it is. Overall, it's very unique, but yet very familiar from some of the big brand names that are out there. When we look at the overall finishing of this watch, we see that there's lots of brushed as well as high polished areas that come together to give this watch a really nice overall finish. Now, Maurice Lacroix went with a claw design on the bezel of this watch, which it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but when you look at the watch and all the elements together, I think it looks really nice. And it really gives this watch a very handsome look that works perfectly with the integrated bracelet that we're about to talk about right now. If you haven't already noticed, this watch does take a lot of design cues from other popular integrated bracelet models such as the Royal Oak, and it's seen even within the bracelet itself. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The bracelet on this watch is extremely comfortable and tapers really, really well. It fits the wrist perfectly, really. And that's a real benefit of integrated bracelets. They just fit well. And like most integrated bracelets, this watch has a very easy to use quick release system. You just pinch these two pins together and you're easily switching your straps out. And this bracelet has a really nice butterfly clasp and has the Maurice Lacroix logo engraved into it there as well, which I think is a nice touch. And the finishing continues to places where you otherwise wouldn't notice it. So when you open up the clasp, it actually has a really nice engine turn finish within that section as well. Now, one area where I wish Maurice Lacroix did something different is in the way that the bracelet is held together. I wish that they would have gone with a screw system as opposed to just a pin that holds everything together. The extra cost would have been a little bit more, but when you're looking at a watch that has this kind of finishing and attention to detail, I think they missed out on an opportunity here. Maurice Lacroix uses what's called the ML115 movement in this watch, and that is a Sellita SW200-1 base caliber. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Great movement, and here we can see that Maurice Lacroix takes that base caliber and does their own finishing to it, which is a step above a lot of other manufacturers. And here we can see that they carried through that engine turn finishing into the movement, as well as finishing the rotor themselves as well. Now the real test of a movement is how well it truly functions. And here we can see that on the time grapher, it sits at about +7 to +8 seconds per day, has a really good amplitude of 294 and a very low beat error of 0.1 milliseconds. Overall, this movement runs well. Being a watch with an integrated bracelet does have its own drawbacks, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit while I'm switching this strap out here. So this particular watch that I have comes in a set with an additional blue leather Maurice Lacroix strap, and this strap is actually really nice. Now, if you've ever had an integrated watch before, you'll know that strap options are not readily available, and this watch falls into the same category as that. I haven't been able to find too much for this. You kind of have to go through Maurice Lacroix to get a nice strap. The only real option I found was going on AliExpress, and I did order a blue rubber strap from there, but it turned out to be what you would expect from AliExpress. Not really something that I'm personally going to be using on this watch, but I do wish there were more options available. Let's start by taking a look at how this watch fits on the wrist. It's amazing. I love how comfortable this watch is. It's a very handsome watch, especially on this blue leather strap that it comes with. And the way that these lugs curve down with the integrated bracelet and strap makes it very, very comfortable on the wrist. Overall, this is a beautiful watch. It has lots of strong design details that all come together, and it's executed perfectly, from these really nice claws, the overall shape of the case, the beautiful dial as well is perfectly contrasted with this. The high polished hands and indices, and this blue leather strap that my kit comes with is really nice. And we get to see the same finishing that they put in on the strap as well, with the embedded logo, the overall finishing. Even within the clasp, we get that same engine turn finish. So it's really, really well done. And I think I'm actually going to keep this strap on this watch for a little while, just to kind of change it up instead of the bracelet there. Now, when we're looking at the overall fit, finish, and everything that makes this watch, I would describe it as luxury on a budget, because it really looks way more higher end, way more premium than the price point that you can get this watch at. And when it's on the wrist, it's truly something different than all the other integrated watches out there. You don't have a PRX on your wrist. You have something that's very different from everybody else.